then, so I'm delighted to be joined by John Curtin, who's CIWEM's president. He's going to say some opening words. Then I'm going to give a little introduction to the concept of spongy landscapes. Then we're going to pass on to our guests today, our spongy landscape pioneers, who are going to talk through some case studies of doing this stuff with farmers. And then it will come back to me, and I'll provide a summary of the policy recommendations in the report, and then we'll have a Q&A session towards the end. And then John will wrap up with some final words. Okay, so I will hand over to John then. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you, everyone. John Curtin here. The absolute privilege of being CIWEM's president. Hence why I'm wearing a piece of bling. This is not what I wear around the house every day. And I'm also a bit scrubbed up because we're interviewing as well today. So I don't also do this sort of dress up when I'm doing one of these sessions. So this is really exciting. And luckily we've got the people on with the real stories as part of the report, the Spongy Landscapes report. But I just wanted to share a small personal lesson myself and the journey I've been on in this space. So I was in the Environment Agency for over 30 years, from a graduate to Director of Operations and Flood Exec. And two experiences of my time in the Environment Agency were 2 months before the floods in Somerset in 2013, 2014, I became our Director of Incident Management Resilience. And 2 weeks before Storm Desmond hit the north, I became the Exec Director of Flood and Coastal Risk Management. So I sort of arrived just before some devastating floodings occur. And as I show on this slide here, in the heat of flooding, it becomes a very political story, and clearly the impact on communities is horrendous. And you really are in the heat of an incident during these events. But the next picture, Kat, was one that really struck me when I was just starting my life in flood risk, which was during the 13-14 floods. If we could just have the next slide.
Can you see that? The one with the map, the aerial image.
So during these massive floods we had across Somerset, the Thames and the River Severn, etc., there was a period where the clouds did part for a short period, and this lovely shot was taken. And it really struck me because this is at the height of the River Severn flooding and the River Thames flooding, and you can just see the amount of sediment and land coming off the UK out into the sea. And it really struck me that many times we'll think of this as a technical issue or an engineering issue or a hydrological issue, but most of what we're involved in CIWEM is really a landscape issue. And this probably illustrates as much as anything the impact flooding and drought especially can have on our environment. I have shown this slide in the Netherlands, and they quite like it because they do a lot of dredging just off their coast to fill up their coastal defences. So I think they're thinking we're exporting English farmland for their flood defences, but that's not quite the case. So this was a real eye-opener for me as I started my journey as leading flood risk management in the Environment Agency. Next slide. Because I was also the first non-engineer to have that job. And if there's one thing I was driving through my time, 6 or 7 years leading flood risk management, is about moving flood defence into flood risk management, and how our real resilience to flooding and climate shocks in the future will be this mosaic of different interventions alongside traditional engineering that will really help increase our resilience to the sort of climate shocks we have. So I've been on a bit of a journey myself. It was partly driven by that middle photo that I saw, and I'm really, really excited to be able to listen to some of the stories that are in CIWEM's report. So thanks, Ken.
Thanks very much, John. So why spongy landscapes? So I think the land is a vital component of water and environmental management. Water resources and rivers are derived from our landscapes. When water falls on land, it's runoff, or it's absorbed or it's filtered, and it eventually makes its way to drains, to the rivers, lakes, reservoirs, and the sea. So I see rivers and water bodies really being a distillation of what happens on the landscape. So if we want flowing rivers, if we want safe bathing waters, clean drinking water, less storm water deluging our homes, roads and businesses, then we need to think seriously about how our landscape is managed. And given that 70% of the UK is agricultural land, we should consider farmers and rural land managers as critical stewards of our rivers and water resources. And we're calling this kind of water stewardship of our rural landscapes. And it's vital for food security. Farmers are increasingly having to deal with the extremes of weather, as we've seen in the droughts of 2022 and more recently 2025, but then also waterlogging, as we've seen early this year. It's been the wettest start to the year since records began in some places. So farmers are struggling to maintain production. And if rainfall can be held within healthy soils and in farm ponds, it provides resilience to drought, growing crops, as well as reducing flooding of farms and fields downstream as well. So my big message is really how rainfall is managed as it falls on our landscape, and it's something we should really be focusing on. So what do we mean by a spongy landscape? So a spongy landscape is where land is managed in a way that increases its ability to store, slow down and filter water. And it includes measures such as increasing soil health and moisture retention, porosity through regenerative agricultural techniques. It includes things like tree planting, hedgerow planting that absorbs water. And it also includes measures that hold back water per catchment areas in on-farm wetlands, but also connects rivers to their floodplains, so you've got storage there as well. And these water stewardship measures mean that rain doesn't run straight off the soil of farms, taking with it soil and chemicals and excess nutrients. Rather, the landscape is acting more like a sponge and absorbing and slowing water. So recognizing this, CIWEM's been exploring pioneers of spongy landscapes across different rural settings to try and understand the role that the farm landscape is playing in water and environmental management, and also how it's being valued by society. So we're going to hear from those spongy landscape pioneers today. So I will introduce them briefly in a moment, but first I just want to go through very briefly some of the key findings from those pioneers or case studies. The case studies provided a snapshot of evidence for the quantum of water that can be retained and filled by farming landscapes, and some of that evidence is illustrated here. So I've provided some snippets from the infographic in the report, but it's not all there. Whilst it's not a comprehensive evidence base, it does give a clear indication of the profound positive impact that these measures can have on farming communities, the water environment, and also society at large. So, for example, at Waitroses Leckford Estate, Hampshire, which is the writing in the middle of the slide here, arable fields cultivated using regenerative agricultural techniques were found to contain a significantly higher proportion of organic matter content. And this meant that during the dry summer of 2022, that regeneratively farmed field or fields were able to hold an additional month's worth of water. And that meant that barley yields in those fields were 60% greater than the other fields. We're going to hear a little bit more from Archie at Spain's Hall Estate, but I just want to pick out a couple of figures there. Modelling done on the Spain's Hall Estate suggests that if soils were managed in the right way, the amount of water that could be stored across the whole estate and in wetlands as well would be the equivalent to 12% of the planned reservoir in Cambridgeshire. So that just really gives you an indication of just how kind of valuable this store is of water. hydrological modelling that was done at the estate shows that water that's held on the estate could actually boost downstream summer flows by 5 to 10%, as well as reducing flood peak flows as well. What these demonstrated was that on-farm water stewardship is valued not just by farmers benefiting from increased climate resilience and increased yields, but also by businesses and communities on the front line when it comes to the impacts of floods, drought, and also pollution. The report contains a summary of this, what we're calling value, drawn from the case studies. And in some cases, that value has been calculated through economic modelling, but mostly it's been revealed through actual payments. And you can see some of the payments that we're seeing for the benefits of sponge landscapes there on the slide. So Affinity Water, who we're going to hear from in a moment, they are protecting their water supplies in Hertfordshire by paying an uplift on SFI payments to farmers. And that's so that they use cover crops and companion crops to absorb excess nutrients and protect that water supply. Some water has a scheme, and they are also piloting payments to farmers in the Upper Belt in Kent, and we'll hear from Cleo in a minute about that. And that's to increase the resilience of their water supplies as well. And we found that spongy landscapes are valued beyond the water sector too. And that's been demonstrated by Coca-Cola investing on-farm wetlands in the upper Calder catchment in West Yorkshire, and also by Network Rail, who are investing in natural flood management in Northeast Cotswolds in order to protect their Worcester to Oxford line, which was heavily flooded. I think it was in 2007 summer floods. So some of the case studies have also used economic analysis to try and put a sort of monetary value on this. And you can see some examples there of that wider value. So, for example, in the Northeast Cotswolds, the farm calculated the value of £8,000 to £9,000 per hectare can be derived from, and that's for all the social and environmental benefits that would be accrued from doing this type of work on the farm landscape there. So I'm going to stop there because I really do want to give time to our landscape pioneers, to our case studies. So I am excited to introduce them here. So we've got Cleo Alper, who's Senior Catchment Officer from the South East Rivers Trust. She's going to talk about work in the Upper Belt catchment in Kent. We've got Tom Mearskoff, the CEO of the Wyre Rivers Trust, who's going to talk about natural flood management work done in the northwest of England. Then Archie Ruggles-Bryce from Spain's Hall Estate that I've mentioned. Danny Coffey from Affinity Water. And then finally, Andy Brett, who makes it after his training. He's going to talk about work in West Yorkshire in the Calder catchment. So I will pass on to Cleo to kick us off.
Thank you. So I'm Cleo, as Kat said, and I'm a Senior Catchment Officer at the South East Rivers Trust. At the South East Rivers Trust, we work across 12 river catchments in the southeast of England, and this is focusing on a project in the River Medway. I do just want to say that this work has been going on for quite some time, and a lot of projects in advance of this, which have helped to really deliver this. So it's whole host of pioneers from various different backgrounds. Okay, next slide, please, Kat. So the Belt Resilience Pilot is based in the headwaters of the River Belt, which is the largest tributary of the River Medway. It's really dominated by wilding clay and sits in almost like a bowl landscape, which means that the river responds, really quickly to rainfall and causes a lot of flooding downstream, as well as drought during the drier months. So it's a largely farmed landscape, and there is abstraction further downstream towards Yalding as well for drinking water. So our project focuses on the headwaters, which was picked out due to previous projects funded through various government schemes. We did some natural capital mapping and looked at private financing options, all of which led to us choosing a set of sites. So within this project, we've worked across 6 land holdings, over 21 acres, and that includes a mixture of land uses such as arable, grazing, woodland, nature reserve, and a real big mix. And the shared goal between all the people contributing was sort of using nature-based solutions to improve water resilience and water quality while delivering wider biodiversity benefits and ensuring that the approach works for the farmers' businesses as well. Okay, next slide, please. So I've already touched on the fact that quite a few people came together to make this project happen. So the image at the top represents the landowners who have been essential in making this happen. Ourselves, Southern Water, who are funding the project, and have been in that sort of pilot co-collaboration scheme. We've had input from so many other organisations and individuals which have really come together. And I think this collaboration side has been one of the biggest benefits to this project and strengths of the project. So in terms of what we've delivered, can you go to the next slide, Kat? We've created a spongy landscape through various river restoration, on the ground work, including stage 0, which is completely infilling the river channel. And on one farm, which you can see in the image in the top corner, we just raised the bed by 50%, as to have not as much of an impact on the agricultural land that you can see in the image. So that is to reconnect the water to its floodplains. We've roughened the terrain, dug scrapes, ponds, and there was a slight bit of remeandering as well. We've done over 44 leaky woody dams across the 6 land holdings. But as well as the capital works, there's been a huge amount of other things that have gone into this project. So we've been doing some baseline monitoring for the last 3 years, looking at various metrics such as flow, water quality, botanical surveys, all things like that. And we've also quantified the financial benefits to Southern Water and the landowners of implementing these solutions on their land. There's been a lot of collaboration and also looking at how we do education on these areas to sort of show the wider benefits. Okay, next slide, Kat. So the expected benefits are significant. So we anticipate slower movement of water through the catchment and increased storage. We used the Rivers Trust replenish metric to estimate that over 65,000 cubic meters will be stored annually on the interventions that we have installed over the summer. Water quality should improve through sediment and pollutant capture, and we're already seeing positive changes in biodiversity on some of the sites. Some of the monitoring we've got from previous phases of this work show that the leaky woody dams are retaining water and positively influencing the sediment processes. And a site on one of the farms that we did stage 0 previously shows greater stability in water quantity and quality fluctuations, which is really exciting. And an unexpected benefit is the leaky woody dams that have matured are being used by crossing points as lots of wildlife across the river. Okay, final slide. So just a few of the reflections and what's really enabled this to happen. So it's been a really rewarding project, and I think the earlier scoping through other projects funded by government schemes were really essential because they laid the groundwork for that mapping and those relationships, as well as finding that sort of private finance option that's been made available. The landowners' input has been so essential throughout. It really has been a co-collaboration, putting ideas together, going back and forth, and just really allowing that flexibility for it to change based on the farm's needs and everything else has been really key. Southern Water funding it has been really flexible and really enabling because we've been able to do the monitoring, we've been able to do the engagement and things like that, which has been really key. And part of that is sort of using it as a demonstration site. We're going to be working with the landowners for the next 5 years to continue monitoring and maintenance and also the evaluation of ongoing benefits. And one of the things we really still need to focus on is securing funding moving forward because this is just the 5 years. Okay, Kat, final slide. I've already mentioned a few of these enablers. And as I said, I think the landowners are the big thing here, as well as that flexible funding. Having time to work with the landowners and co-design, be flexible, do the monitoring has made a really significant difference. It's hard to find another funding streams. And finally, one of the enablers was with the planning, a lot of spoil had to be moved. And with all the regulations and stuff around that, luckily we were able to use the permitted development under Southern Water to help with some of those permissions. But fab, thank you. Apologies for going over.
Great, thanks, Cleo. And I will pass on to Tom then.
Thanks, Kat. Hi everyone, I'm Tom from the Wye Rivers Trust. I'll just talk to you today about our Wye Catchment NFM project. Next slide, please, Kat. So this is the, sorry, it's very laggy at this end. This is the Wye catchment situated in North Lancashire, between the Lune and Ribble catchments. The pink area there is our project area, which is approximately 100 square kilometres, give or take. So the Wye Catchment NFM project is the UK's first green investment NFM project, delivering around 70 hectares of NFM interventions across the project area there. These are split into wetland and grassland interventions. So any wetland interventions, anything to make the land wetter, and grassland focuses really on buffer strips and soil management. So the project is funded by a group of investors. So these are made up of institutional impact investors and high net worth individuals. And that investment is repaid by buyers who are the beneficiaries of the investment. So these buyers are the Environment Agency, United Utilities, Wye Council, the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee and Flood Re. And we've also got some support from the Woodland Trust for hedgerow creation. So this project is important because Churchtown, which sits in the centre of the catchment, was flooded quite regularly during Storm Desmond and has probably been flooded 3 or 4 times since. There was no traditional way of delivering flood defence in that area, so we needed to think on our feet and do something more natural in the upper catchment. And we've probably had 30 of the top 50 highest flows in the last 70 years, in the last 15 years. So it's no more important time to do it than now. Next slide, please. Kat. So this is the transaction structure for the project. So in the middle, you've got a CIC, which is a special purpose vehicle that was set up to deliver the project. This CIC takes funding from the impact investors, and this is then handed out to us as a project management and delivery partner and the land managers for hosting and maintaining interventions in the catchment. This then gives us these nature-based solutions that are shown at the bottom, which is made up of the 70 hectares of NFM measures and about 50 hectares of woodland creation. We then get the ecosystem services from those interventions. So the key ones within this are around 60,000 metres cubed of storage in the upper catchment and a whole host of multiple benefits for water quality, habitat connectivity and other things. The buyers are then this group of people that I mentioned before that repay the investment. So that's the investment plus a 6% interest fee. So this payment then goes back into the CIC and is repaid, the loan is then repaid to the investors, which completes the circle. So I've been talking about this project for a very long time now, and we finally completed the circle and we've made our first repayment to the investors. So the model is working. And we've got a further 6 years of repayments to make before we will finish the project. Next slide, please, Kat. So this is our delivery, which was completed from 2022 to 2025. So you can see the original targets there, which are based in some, based off from modelling and from working with a range of landowners and land managers, but the actual delivery varied. So around 1,300 leaky dams, 6 hectares of ponds and scrapes, some low-level earth bunds, around 12 kilometres of hedgerow creation, about a kilometre of floodplain reconnection, and then some large areas of peat restoration and grassland restoration. If I was going to do this project again, we'd do a lot more grassland restoration. It was very popular with our land managers. And on the right is an image of an area that was actually restored for grassland, and we did some work within the floodplain as well. If you want to just click Cat, which will show the intervention. So we did a small stage 0 restoration. The watercourse flows from the top of the image to the bottom, and we block the watercourse somewhere in the centre there, and you can see the result with the watercourse being forced out into its whole channel, and it's now creating a nice anastomose network of channels, which is developing very nicely at the site. Next slide, please, Kat. So this is an example of some of the data we've gathered through the project. We've got a stage hydrograph from Storm Ellen and Storm Fergus, which was in December 2023. The red line is downstream level logger, the blue line is upstream, the green bars are rainfall. So as we can see at the start of the time series, we've got relatively similar levels at both level loggers. And then we can see the difference as the interventions start to take effect. So the gap between the red line and the blue line, at the peaks is effectively what's being stored within the catchment that we're monitoring there. And then probably one of the most important things on this graph is the fact that the lines begin to come back together before we get to the second peak. So that shows that those interventions are then able to react to further rainfall because they're not always full, which is a crucial thing with NFM. So it's quite a nice graph, really. And there's actually another peak beyond this time series that you can see on here, which is also has got really good storage within it. The difference in level is about 22%, which is within the expected benefits that we would get from NFM features. Just last slide now. So this is just some time-lapse photography of that site, just to show that I'm not making it up. So you can see the leaky dam behind the stage board there, and then if Cat flicks through the image, we can see that it's then inundated at around 7:45. That's only 12 hours later, so that's quite a big increase in depth during that rainfall event. And I think there is another image on that follows, which is when the lines have come back together in that graph. So that's that. Thanks, Kat.
Thanks very much, Tom. And I'm amazed you've got what is it, 1,710 of those across the catchment, did you say?
1,300 now. We decided that 1,700 was
1,300. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I will pass on to Archie then.
Great, thanks very much. Yeah, some big shoes to follow after those two. That's some seriously impressive work. So I'm going to sort of start at the kind of micro scale with the work we've done on the farm. Kat mentioned some of the modelling work, and you can get that report online on our website. And really, the point of doing that was to build on a natural capital appraisal we did back in 2019, where we felt that water was a really important thing. We're in the east of England. Water is a valuable commodity. And it underpins most of the agricultural production in the east, either through active irrigation or, in our case, just passively having enough water around to grow things. But there wasn't really any value associated with it, and we couldn't prove what we could do with our planned land use changes, which are large-scale agroforestry, beaver enclosures, which are generating wetlands, aspirations to do things with wider water management in the ditch network, the drainage network in the estate. So my challenge to the modelers was really to look at this landscape, forecast what we were going to do, rerun the models, but more importantly, put flood and drought together. Because in our scenario, the key thing is about bridging the gap between having too much water and too little water, which in our case can be as little as a couple of months. We can go from being inundated to being in drought conditions so quickly. We're on a clay soil, so you go from porridge to concrete in about a month, most years. So what we wanted to try and do with the report was just get some figures to understand what are the things we should be focusing on. Are we relevant to the bigger picture? The farm itself covers about half of the local river catchment, which is a sub-catchment of the Pant, which is part of the ELU's transfer scheme. So one of the only current inter-catchment water transfer schemes, which comes down from the Wash and ultimately provides water to South Essex and East London through Essex and Suffolk Water. So I kind of felt like we had a relevance, but we weren't able to talk about it properly. So the whole farm reservoir study was designed to try and understand, okay, what can we claim? What are the sort of things we should be thinking about? And Kat mentioned the sort of headlines. So, a bit of extra water in the summer, up to 20 to 30% flood risk to our local village, which was great. But what really stood out to us was the value of soil. So we forecast going from a sort of conventional arable system to this large-scale grasslands, large-scale agroforestry, lots and lots of water-holding interventions. And it sort of brought out that actually soil is the thing we should be focusing on. There are other things we can do, but in the grand scheme of things, it's the difference between 6,000 million litres, megalitres of total water storage on the estate in the soil versus 85 million litres of water in our ditch network potentially. And in the beaver enclosures, which are the things that get all the headlines and really love, we're talking about 20 to 25 megalitres of storage. So it was really useful just to give us that kind of perspective to say, okay, whilst all these kind of formalized NFM structures, which we really support and we've done, so we've done leaky dams, we've done the beaver enclosures, we should really be thinking about undoing some of the drainage that had been put in the landscape over the last 500 years. And how can we do that? So the next thing we tried to do was think about how do we value that? How do we build the financial models to make it possible? Because at the moment, the margins in farming are so slim that anything that sacrifices yield or increases costs or reduces productive area runs the risk of being discarded because it's just not possible to do that. It's worth saying we haven't quite cracked that yet. And my work with Great Yellow then zooms out to the very large scale. So we're taking these principles and we're working with 480,000 hectares worth of land, 40% of the landscape recovery projects, to build those financial models. So building on the excellent work that Tom's done in The Wire and others is to try and say, okay, well, how do we understand the value of this work, both in a market and an economic sense? How do we bring it together? But then importantly, how do we actually build those financial structures? So Tom mentioned an SPV. We're rolling these out all over the country. We're working with water companies in various catchments to make this stuff investable. We've got investors queuing up to put capital in. So therefore, there's an argument that government can step away from the capital side of things and start underwriting the revenues, which actually may end up meaning that the public purse doesn't pick up any of the costs because the ancillary revenues are so great to the private investors. So this is what we're trying to do. So it's really interesting to see CIWEM's report, and this is going to be super supportive to the work that we're doing to try and take it both from a farm scale but also from a policy scale down, make it meet in the middle, and then bring in all those actors that everyone's talking about, the water companies, the infrastructure providers, the electricity transfer networks, whoever has a risk they want to ameliorate or a benefit they want to acquire, and we can build the structures for that. So really building on that sort of farm scale work up is super important, and this evidence points that all these pioneers are talking about today are the really important things to focus on next and to help build the momentum here. So thanks, Kat.
Thanks, Archie. Great stuff, and really good to have that macro view as well from your time at Great Yellow. Danny, on to you. Do you think you can cover it in 3 or 4 minutes? I'm just conscious of time. I wanted to make sure we get through everything.
Yeah, no, I'll do my best there for that, Kat. So hi everyone, I'm Danny Coffey. I lead the catchment management team at Affinity Water. For a bit of context, Affinity Water, we're the UK's largest clean water only supply company. So we supply clean water only to an average of we supply to 3.9 million people across the southeast of England, an average of 969 million litres of water per day on average there. So most of our supply comes from groundwater sources, about 60%, mainly from the chalk aquifer, and 40% comes from the River Thames and imports there. As Archie's mentioned, the southeast of England, it's classed as water stressed by the Environment Agency, as well as having a growing population which requires resilient and wholesome drinking water for the future. Not to mention our supply area is home to around 9% of the UK's rare chalk stream habitat. So we're finding ways that meets the needs of our customers and the environment. So we've reduced abstraction from the chalk by nearly 100 million litres of water per day since the 90s and invested in future supply infrastructure. But we also recognise that there's a role for catchment nature-based solutions here, delivered through the Water Industry National Environment Programme to create more resilient chalk catchments and spongy landscapes, as has been mentioned. So on the next slide, our case study really focuses on our catchment management journey from addressing single water quality issues such as nitrate or pesticides towards a focus on soil health to benefit water quality and water resources, and the multiple other natural capital benefits like drought and flood resilience too. So we've formed a long-running relationship with Groundswell, now the UK's largest regenerative farming festival, which is hosted in our supply area, and it's in its 10th year now, and also through visits to nearby Spain's Hall, kindly hosted by Archie as well. We started to realise the importance of regenerative farming principles and that intrinsic link between soil and water. And we now see soils as the most sustainable form of water treatment, with well-structured soils rich in organic matter, holding more water, reducing erosion, filtering contaminants and protecting chalk streams, and allowing more water to be held and infiltrate down into the aquifer. And cover crops were a good starter, a good soil health starter for us. We've funded trials since 2016. We know the benefits that they can have for fixing nitrate in the soils. We then went on to fund farmers to grow over 11,000 hectares of cover and companion crops across all priority areas in AMP7, really to keep catchments covered and help build organic matter. But then we started realising the wider benefits, especially when we worked with Atkins, who carried out a natural capital evaluation of our work in North Hertfordshire, assessing ecosystem services such as climate regulation, soil erosion and water flow regulation. And their assessment identified a £671 per hectare benefit compared to an average cost of £120 per hectare invested by us in cover crops. So an overall 6-to-1 natural capital benefit ratio there. We further extrapolated those individual ecosystem services across that total 11,000 hectares. We're able to estimate that approximately 163 tonnes of nitrate were reduced from being lost to the chalk aquifer, and approximately 2,500 tonnes of sediment prevented from being lost from arable fields across priority areas. And this all fed into our PR24 business planning. And that brings us to now, really, on the next slide, please, Kat, our WINEP AMP8 programme. So we're continuing to work with farmers to prevent groundwater quality deterioration, but we're also implementing soil health focused measures and gathering vital data to see how we can support farmers and landowners create more resilient catchments which benefit water resources. And to do that, we want to work towards long-term change in land management through our functioning soils scheme. So we're still funding cover and companion cropping, including SFI top-ups to farmers. But there's now more of a focus on knowledge exchange and recruiting and funding farmers to attend our Soils Connected courses and form learning groups across priority catchments. So for 2 years now, we've funded these 5-day courses in collaboration with Hutchinson's to work with farmers to understand the true value of their soils in a practical way on their farms and explore how soil health is key for creating resilient farm businesses. And we've funded 46 farmers managing over 18,000 hectares of priority catchment to attend. And we plan to link this to tailored on-farm funding in the future, so farmers can try new things for their soils. To further drive long-term change, we've teamed up with Wild Farm for the 2nd year now to support farmers access regenerative farming premium payments to help support their uptake. And we pay £75 per hectare on top of the Wild Farm premium to farmers in priority areas, further helping the uptake of regenerative practices and optimisation and reduction in inputs. And finally, new to us, in 2025, we're contributing funding towards nature-based solutions on unproductive areas of land for our water and the landscape scheme to help slow the flow, improve infiltration and recharge. And this year we've funded 13 projects across priority catchments, including pond creation, hedgerow and tree planting, a wet woodland creation, chalk grassland creation, all pictured there, as well as a number of agroforestry projects. And AMP8 is really going to be a vital time for us to monitor those benefits of nature-based solutions and gather real-world data to understand their capacity to hold more water. All of this, we hope, will contribute to more resilient chalk catchments and spongy landscapes across our supply area this AMP and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Danny. That's great. And we have been joined by Andy. So Hello, Andy. Good to see you. You've got a couple of minutes, if you can, just to explain what you've been doing in the Calder Valley.
Yeah, thanks, Kat. Apologies, everyone, for running late. Hi, I'm Andy Bray, General Manager of Calder Rivers Trust. So since 2023, we've been working in partnership with Coca-Cola to deliver volumetric water benefit within the catchment of their Wakefield production plant. So we're based in West Yorkshire, the gap between Manchester and Leeds that drains the South Pennine Moors. And we've been working with landholders to try and address issues around water resilience, and both in terms of drought and natural and flood resilience, by delivering on-farm wetlands. So what you can see here are 3 images of a project site that we delivered a couple of years ago, where we broke out a culverted watercourse, bringing that to the surface, so adding that kind of environmental and ecological benefit, improving water quality, and providing both flood and drought resilience by reconnecting the water with natural hydrology. So in the Calder catchment, around 78% of our tributaries have at least one reservoir at their head, and that means that the flow of water through our catchment is incredibly modified. And so one of the things that we're trying to do through this partnership with Coca-Cola and with local landholders is deliver some more of that natural resilience and natural hydrology by undoing where we as society have modified the way that we're managing land and water. So looking at how we can be removing land drains to provide those multiple benefits, as well as creating habitat and flood benefit too. And we work in partnership with landholders through 10-year agreements, where we cover the entire cost of them, and we support them with annualized payments for their management and maintenance over that 10-year period. And that benefit, that volumetric water benefit, is delivered to, is received by Coca-Cola as a water stewardship benefit for their global water usage, but focused primarily on their Wakefield plant. And this is a really useful tool in our on our mission to address those kind of shared water challenges that we have within the Calder catchment, those multiple pressures that our catchment faces, and using this funding mechanism through volumetric water benefit to deliver a more resilient and spongy landscape, a more resilient catchment that enables us to enables both farm businesses to prosper and provides benefit downstream as well. Thank you.
That's great, Andy. Thanks very much. Okay, so I'm going to whiz through the final part here, so we've got some time for Q&A. But I do want to show you this. So these are the headline policy asks coming out of these case studies. So based on what we heard from the case studies around the challenges and also the enablers, we worked with a number of different people and organisations, including CIWEM's Natural Capital Policy Panel, to develop these 7 asks of the government. And essentially, these asks, we think, will enable what we've heard today to be done across the whole of the farm landscape. That's what we'd like to see. We really want to see soil health, cover crops, wetlands, and all of those things that are slowing and filtering flow to be the norm across our farming landscapes. And as you can see here, a whole range of things are going to be needed. And these are just the headlines. There's quite a lot of detail beneath each of these. And I'm going to just go into 2 or 3 of them in a tiny bit more detail. So our first ask is really to ensure that the ELMS framework has certainty, longevity, and adequate funding to make this stuff happen. And the main point here is that consistency is absolutely key, because there's been a lot of uncertainty around ELMS. It's sort of been switched on and off, and that's been really damaging for farmers that want to pick up these things. Landscape recovery, which is the top tier of ELMS, we really want to see the termination clause in that extended beyond 12 months, because at the moment it feels like that 12 months is destroying any investor confidence or even farmer confidence in getting involved in those large scale schemes. The other key thing is ensuring that there's government support for a market framework to catalyse private funding and investment. So as demonstrated by many of the case studies, private funding or funding from businesses has the potential to offer support to many of these things. And given the government's budgetary constraints, private funding is going to be absolutely vital to achieve the spongy landscapes across our farmed landscape. So for this to really take off, we need things like common performance metrics, verified tools and calculators. We need stacking rules and a hierarchy for stacking and additionality. So we need all of those things to be put in place. And a lot of work has been done in this space already. For example, the replenish calculator used by the Rivers Trust, the market principles being developed by BSI. So government really needs to build on that really good stuff and endorse it. But perhaps the most important thing here, and Archie touched on this, is for government to be really clear on what it can support. So seed funding for developing these types of schemes is great. That's the things like NERF and landscape recovery development funding has been super helpful. That needs to continue. But the government also needs to support these nascent private markets. It needs to support them to get going by underwriting payments for outcomes such as flood risk or water quality. That it needs to underwrite those because those funding streams are not yet coming through. They will do in time. And that means that investors can stump up upfront funding for those capital costs for some of these schemes. And then finally, just broadly to the water white paper, it does refer to pre-pipe solutions, but we do feel that the vital role that what we've talked about today doesn't really feature in the water white paper properly. We think that restoring wetlands, reconnecting floodplains, improving soils and creating the space for water must be treated as essential infrastructure and not as an optional extra. And that's going to require a joined up approach across land use, planning and infrastructure, and not just focusing on the water industry alone. So we're calling for, like the headline is really that we're independent regional planning function that really aligns the different funding for this type of work that exists in budgetary cycles, and also crucially is informed by catchment plans which identify priority areas. And those catchment plans should really be informed by farmers who have a knowledge of the landscape and by soil data and landscape characteristics. I think I'll leave it there and make sure that we've got time for questions. So thank you.
Thanks, Kat. Back to me, I think, and thanks for those speakers. Some brilliant examples there from everyone. We've got a few minutes for some questions. I'll go to the chat now. But what we'll do is we'll try and answer as many as we can if we don't get them all squeezed in now. So a kick-off, Stella is asking, could the Ofwat Innovation Fund be used to fund these types of projects? So Danny, I don't know whether you've got any experience with trying to convince Ofwat to invest this type of stuff.
Yeah, we were part of the mainstreaming nature-based solutions piece that was an Ofwat innovation bid. I've been involved in some others, not around nature-based solutions, but I feel that this is, there's a real need to sort of start understanding the benefits of nature-based solutions across the wider landscape. So I think that could be the foundation for an Ofwat innovation bid. I think the new window's opened early March for that sort of thing. So that could be an option for that.
It's probably a good point, Kat, that we're going to send this report out and of course give it to our members. But Kat, I don't know whether we've got plans to perhaps write to some different organisations, not least Ofwat, just to show what we've learned and some of our asks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll be sharing this across our networks. Yeah.
Brilliant. Daniel Johns. Hi, Daniel. Daniel's asking, and it was a big moment for DEFRA, wasn't it, this week or last week? The land use frameworks come out with ELM's Oh, blimey. Sustainable Farming Initiatives, SFIs, if I remember that. Measures and payments could go for this sort of stuff, but only some. So I think Daniel was asking what sort of measures, SFI measures, could be targeted towards maximising the sort of work we've seen. I'll open that up to anyone on the panel who's got a view. Don't be shy.
You know, I would.
I can. Oh, go on,
Go
Kat.
for it, Archie.
Okay, so I mean, in our experience, I mean, it really depends on where you are in the country as to what measures are going to be most effective. But in general, we found from the modelling that anything that moves a land use system that is either leading to more compacted soil or more bare soil, speeding off runoff, anything that undoes that is going to be beneficial. And you can do that through, cross-slope planting of hedges. You can do it through any of the grassland buffers. There's a degree to which all of this stuff is likely to be useful, but it's all about trying to get everything done at scale and for a long period of time. And I'd say that's where SFI really comes unstuck, is because the agreement lengths are 3 years, and generally speaking, it's going to take 5 to 10 years to regenerate the soil to the extent that you can actually get decent infiltration. So it's about timing, and I think government needs to be a bit more bold in committing to some of this stuff.
Good point, Archie. Anyone else on the panel?
Yeah, I'll just build on Archie's point there around that 3-year life cycle of an SFI agreement. Landholders need to be able to plan on longer terms than that, and kind of it builds into their business plan, not just for investment in this year or next year, but thinking about the return that they might get from a productivity perspective, which may be years down the line, as well as those environmental benefits. So those longer term commitments from government or from a blend of funding, whether that's public private through landscape recovery or through other funding mechanisms, I think would be really, really strong in that longer term commitment to funding that those landholders are after.
Yeah. We're not unique to this, is it? Long-term resilience issues don't fit nicely into either AMP or parliamentary cycles. But thanks for those replies. Christopher is saying there's quite a lot of flood risk in some of these examples. I think we did expand later on, Christopher, with some other examples. But what sort of work has been done on quantifying the sort of the water quality benefits that we've seen? I think I've seen some really good work in the Cumbria catchment on FCRIT, which has got some really good water quality monitoring into their nature-based solution as well. But anyone collecting data on water quality benefits as well, and what are you seeing?
Can I go? So we are down on the belt. We've got some continuous monitoring going on, looking at the conductivity, temperature, pH, dissolved oxygen, turbidity, ammonium, and nitrates. So at the moment, we just delivered the works in August. So we've got a long way to go to really quantify those benefits, but we will be looking at over the next 5 years. But we've got a really strong baseline. But what we have seen from one of the sites that we delivered stage 0 on previously on one of the farms was that it was the most stable in terms of the fluctuations in those water quality parameters. The ammonium levels were typically low, but there were rare peaks, which suggest localized pollution incidents or inputs. And then the turbidity as well was mostly within moderate range, but there were a few periodic spikes, which we think was sort of that really high flow event. But yeah, we'll keep monitoring that as well and put out anything that comes as we go through the next 5 years.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chloe. That's good. Anyone else on water quality in their pilot?
I mean, at Finsey Water, we've rolled out a lot of baseline sampling, trying to capture the same sort of parameters that we just mentioned there. We've had sort of agroforestry projects going in with soil probes, looking at nutrient cycling, soil moisture, and we have existing data as well that we can help with modelling around some of the soil measures like companion cropping and reducing the runoff of pesticides. We've got sort of porous pot data to put into modelling there as well. So yeah, a key focus for us is still the water quality benefit that these nature-based solutions can bring.
Thanks, Danny. I'll move on and see if we can squeeze a couple more in. So, Anna, I think you've made reinforcing the same point, and welcome from the Netherlands to the conference, about we need time to make these things work. So that reinforces the point from across the channel. Anything going on in Wales? Not more broadly on this. Do we know of any examples where NRW or others are working on these type of working?
I think they are. We didn't manage to include a Welsh case study in this report, which is disappointing, but I know that NRW and Welsh Water are working on some things, particularly upper catchment work, looking at livestock grazing and how to ensure that it's less intensive, and so you don't have that compaction of the soil and it's more spongy.
Brilliant. I'll do one last one and then I'll do a very short summary just to help time. But I think Andrew's point, which is for you, Cleo, at the moment, but I think it's probably more widely for the panel, just very briefly, raising flood beds, causing more natural flooding for managing the water course, but how the public perception of this in all of your projects. I know it's difficult sometimes to say, how does a community respond? Because what's a community? But how are you feeling the community has seen your work? I'll start with you, Cleo, especially on the example that Andrew's given.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, it's always going to be difficult. I think there are a lot of people that still want a lot of that dredging. But I think really just demonstrating the benefits and having those projects where we could set those examples and use them is really, really valuable. And that's one of the reasons we want to use this project as a demonstration site to bring other organisations, other farmers, the community in and use it for education and other things as well, really get people seeing those benefits and quantifying them. And I think it extends past the dredging as well. You know, I think getting feedback from others on something that can be quite a controversial subject, like, you know, we've had some really positive messaging from anglers who are against weir removal, and then they've seen it in action. I think just those stories and that messaging and the evidence is really, really strong for that public communication.
And I think I was once asked what was the biggest skill we miss in the sector, and I think storytelling and showing people, which is why these examples are fantastic. I'll have to wrap on the questions there. I think we got most of them. I just want to end by saying a massive thank you for everyone who's obviously showing an interest in this by coming to the session, and for the brilliant speakers and the examples we've seen. I think what really strikes me is we're beyond now this being an experimental thing. You know, every single speaker has shown examples where this is making a real difference to all sorts of resilience and water quality issues. The main bit is now probably we've got the evidences to try how we're going to get this to become not, you know, as in the Y example, something that was done because a traditional defence couldn't come in place. This is done alongside everything we do on the sort of climate challenges we face. So thank you all for your time. Brilliant piece of work by the CIWEM team. We'll do our best. I'll say goodbye by showing my little Beaver Lodge stick that I always carry in my office here with the little kit marks on the front, which I was given rather confusingly on the River Otter. But thank you all for your time. And thanks again, speakers, for making the time to share your stories. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.